What's going on, guys? RC Life 420 here. In today's video, I'm going to be talking about the Revo 3.3 transmission. This one in particular has the rear brake kit on it, forward only, and I believe it has the high-speed gear ratio inside. But my main topic here is kind of like binding on the transmission. I noticed when you first install the rear brake kit with the screws with the screws that are supplied with the rear brake kit, they're very short, I noticed. So if you set it up with the stock screws, chances are you're gonna have binding and possibly even strip out the screw in the transmission there. So what I did is I put longer screws in, and I'll show you what I actually did in detail, because you actually let the screw go all the way through the transmission, and then you kind of back it off a little bit so it doesn't bother the gears that are inside, because the screw will touch one of the gears inside there if you screw it in too far. That's something you got to keep an eye out for when you do it. You don't want the screw too far in and it's touching one of the gears. You'll definitely create binding. So I'm going to take this apart right now, and we're going to take a look inside, and I'll show you what I did, the little modifications. Also, a pretty common thing you can do is put some pen springs on the brake pads to separate them. So after you've done braking, it'll bounce back to normal. That's a good thing to be doing as well. I wanted to do it on the rear brake kit, but I don't believe it's necessary. I don't think you have to. It's more for this one here. It's kind of nice with the disc rotor. Also, another thing that you need to keep an eye out for is you want the rotor to be free moving. You want it to be able to move forward and back easily. You don't want any binding on this rotor onto the shaft. Okay, let's pull this apart and I'll show you what I'm talking about here. Okay, I've got all the screws removed. A couple things to keep an eye out for when you pull this apart with the rotors and everything on is when you pull this apart, this is going to fall out, the front rotor, and also you got to kind of feed this through for the back ones. So I'll show you sort of what I mean here. I'll try and do it on the camera. So as you pull this apart, the front rotor will drop. There's the front half. And then now you can see the transmission all together as a unit inside. But now we're going to pull out the center differential. And when you pull these out, there's a little pin that you need to watch out for. Okay, you can see that right in there. You got to have that sideways. You can't have it up and down like this, otherwise you'll never get it out. You got to have that sideways. There's a pin there you should remove. There's a little pin in there. Just take that guy out. You got to have the pin sideways though, so you can remove it. Pull this out like that, and then you can remove the pin. Little pin there. Now we're going to remove the center diff. Out that goes. Then we can take out the rear discs. And then here is everything's all apart. We got both halves separated. The first thing let's talk about when we have this apart is the two different styles of bottom gears. You could have a center differential, or you can have a locked out gear here. This one, you can't turn it. It's just a solid gear. This one here has differential fluid inside, and that allows the front and rear wheels to operate at different speeds. But the way I like to see it is this is kind of like a saver, almost like a slipper, or even like a power distributor in a sense, because this kind of determines where your power is going and how much of it's going to the front or the back. So even when you land off of a crazy jump or something, you almost don't want a locked out center differential when you're doing crazy stunts and jumps, because when you land off of a jump, if you land a little bit too heavy on the back or the front, if this is locked out, there's going to be nowhere to transfer the power that the wheels are spinning. If the back lands first, if the back of the truck lands first, the front wheels are still spinning very fast from the air and the jump and all the momentum. So if you land back tires first on a jump, it's just going to immediately want to stop the front ones, or even just the back tires landing and stopping. It's just a lot of stress on the drivetrain. So this center differential eliminates a lot of stress on the drivetrain. It can improve handling for sure if you have the right fluid. You don't want some crazy light fluid in here just spinning the front wheels like crazy. But that's my little rant on the center diff. But I was a little bit curious on weighing the two. I wanted to weigh up the two differentials to see the weight difference here. So we're going by grams here. This is pretty much full with fluid, and that's the way that it would be installed on the truck. So we're at 43 grams for the center differential. And then the Robinson Racing steel bottom shaft with the steel gear, we're at 51 grams. So 51 grams and 43 grams. Interesting little stat there. So but when you run the center differential, you kind of need to have the rear brake kit as well, because if you were to just only run the front brakes, especially if you were running lighter fluid in the diff, it will only lock the front tires and the back will still move. So kind of defeats the whole purpose of the braking. But so that's the center differential there with the rear brake kit shaft on there and everything. So anyway, let's talk about the transmission case a little bit here. We have the springs on the front pads, allowing it to return to its original position after braking. You can see that there. Works really good. On the back where the rear brake kit is screwed in, if you see here, this is where the screws will pop out if you go too far. So you pretty much want to have these flush with the transmission case, maybe even backed off just a little bit. But like I said before, I installed longer screws, and I'll show you just how much longer the screws are that I put in. Here's the longer screw next to the shorter one. It's just longer by a little bit. I've also used this very thin aluminum washer as well. You can see here. But that little bit of extra length allows you to catch that little bit of extra length on the rear brake kit, allows you to catch more thread on the transmission, and also allows you to have a little bit more space in between the pads so that it eliminates the binding that you'll get from the stock setup. And I really like the look of these countersunk washers. You can buy them off of Amazon, and I've been pretty much using them on all my builds, putting them everywhere. I have them on the rockers here for my Revo. I put them on everything. I use them on the front pads. They just kind of make everything look a little more steezy. And here's the front brake pad set up close as well, so you can see it. Right? Just like a real car, the pads separate when you're off the brakes. So what I like to do is put the screws all the way through and then back them out, remove the material that's left behind, because there'll be a little piece of plastic left behind for sure. Take all that out, give it a little sand, a little clean up, smooth it out. and just pretty much set them up so that they're flush with the case there, just to start. And then now we're going to reassemble the transmission. One thing to keep an eye out for is there's supposed to be a little washer on the end of this little shim here. There's supposed to be a little shim on the end of this gear cluster. Just keep an eye out for that shim. There's supposed to be a little one on the end of this gear cluster. So just make sure you don't lose that. The easiest way I found to put these transmissions back together is first you start with the top two gears. You get your two halves. Start with the rear. You start with the back half here. And what you want to do is get the input shaft. Make sure you have your washer on this. Oh shit. Make sure you have your washer on this. We're going to put this gear just like that on there. And then we basically install them together like this in the transmission here. Just like that. So those two go in nicely like that. Now what we're going to do is put the center differential back in. But we also need to set the brake in as well. So we're going to need that pin we took out from earlier and the rear brakes. Another thing, guys, is make sure you don't get any lubricant or anything on your brake pads or rotors, because that will completely affect the braking performance for sure. So make sure your area is clean and you don't use any oil or anything on this stuff. You don't really need to add any oil or anything anywhere other than the bearings. So make sure you've pre-oiled the bearings separately and pretty much throw this together dry. I mean, you could probably put a little bit of grease inside here, but I'm not going to. So we're just going to put this in here like that. This goes like this. And then now the thing you got to watch out for is the pin. So you see the hole there? We're going to have to get that pin in. But first, before we get the pin in, is we should probably get the pads separated a little bit so we can get the rotors in. I found the easiest way to do this is just kind of separate them a little bit. There we go. Let's try and so on this thing, make sure you put it in this way so the pin catches. So there we go. Rotor's on. Now we need to line the pin up with the... So there we go. We're in. The shaft is holding the rotors in. The pin now can go in. So we've got the pin in there. Now we're going to slide this right in there. Okay. That's in. Now we're just going to get the other half and close this thing up. Oh, before we close it up, we have to put the front rotor on. So make sure you don't completely close the transmission because you need to put the front rotor in. And there we go. Get that shaft through there. Kind of finesse this. Okay, we're all closed up. Now it's screwed all back together, and that's pretty much it. Okay, so the other thing I was talking about before was making sure that these pins on the rear, making sure these pins on the front brake don't bind with the rotor. You want to make sure that everything's free moving. I'll show you what I mean here. So this is what I'm talking about. you want to make sure that this rotor and these pins are free. You should be able to put that rotor on and drop it off. You don't want this rotor stuck on these pins too much. You obviously don't want it too loose, but you want some free movement on that, because that will also affect how smooth the transmission rolls as well. So you're going to see here, I'm going to put this on. Install that. Okay. See that? Very smooth. When you brake, it returns back to its original position. There's no binding on the rear brakes there. Everything is moving freely. And like I was saying before, if you're hitting a jump and you land back tire first or something, at least with the center differential, when the back tire lands, pretend my hand is the ground, I'm holding the back tires, the front can still move a little bit, right? The power can transfer somewhere else. When you don't have anywhere for the power to transfer in your drivetrain, almost like how if you run full aluminum on the truck, it's obviously not a good thing if you're bashing, right? You're going to bend aluminum, it's going to be heavy, whatever. But more for the bending and more for not having a breaking point type of deal. So in the drivetrain, you kind of want slipping points, almost like why they put slipper clutches on or things like that. So having the center differential, now you can pretty much lock out the main shaft where your spur gear goes if you wanted to. You could still run the slipper clutch, but I always just lock it out. And I pretty much run them locked anyway, no matter what. But if you had a locked out spur gear and a locked out bottom output shaft here, you're pretty much asking for trouble, because now that all those are locked out, when you land from a hard jump, and if you land funny or whatever, if you're not landing on like one wheel or something so that the diffs can kind of diff out, if you're landing perfectly two wheels, front or the back, that power's going to go somewhere. Or if you went into a wall and had power on, you'll just explode things, man. You need somewhere in the drivetrain that's going to kind of give or whatever. And also, just another side note with the rear brake, you don't have to have these pads so close and touching the rotors. Like, yeah, right now it's probably rubbing just the smallest little bit, but the amount of force that's required to even like start locking these dual disc brakes is not much. So when as soon as the servo pulls on this lever here, these brakes will be locked up in no time. So, and I noticed that they almost don't completely lock up, which is a good thing. They kind of have a little bit of drag, and I mean, it's given. They're a lot smaller than the front one. They're not metal. So I've thought about trying to get the Jado dual disc brakes and putting them on here, because it looks like it's the same kind of setup. I want to try that out and see if that works. I like the steel disc brakes. I'll probably run that on my heavier build. But yeah, guys, that's kind of my little rant on the Revo transmission. Hopefully that kind of helped anybody. This transmission here is obviously run all plastic gears. No Robinson Racing stuff on this one. Like I said, just trying to keep it lightweight. If I ever get my other one out with the Robinson gears, I'll weigh the two together and see what they're weighing in at. But otherwise, that's that. So that's my little rant on the Revo transmission. Hopefully that helped any of you guys, or you found that interesting. Thanks. Have a good one.